savagely ripping into the super robot genre piece by piece.
And 25 years later, it still feels just as subversive.
Fantastic deconstruction of the mech genre.
Awesome. Yeah, Eva's an anti-homage, and then Gurren's the ultimate homage.
Exactly.
Evangelion isn't just a deconstruction of mecha anime, or anime generally, but a deconstruction of all storytelling. One of the prime examples of this is the character of Shinji.
Whereas before, the pilots in mecha shows had been noble, brave, and willing to protect their people, the main character Shinji lives in abject terror of the duty placed upon him.
As the series makes light of the fact that these kids are child soldiers, and that a select few taking responsibility for the entire human race is a terrible idea.
It shows how traumatic this experience would be for 14-year-old kids, and completely spits in the face of the love conquers all theme found in previous mech shows.
Evangelion can sometimes get a mixed reaction in mecha circles despite being very well regarded. Not because of the quality of the anime, but the mix of online exacerbated groans and eye-rolling we can attribute to the discourse. The hyperbolic statements that have been largely passed around by people with not much background information about mecha leads to a lot of these reactions. In the process, many beloved shows of these genres get buried, some of these being the biggest pillars of Japanese animation. One of the most notorious notions is that Evangelion is a deconstruction of the mecha genre or intentionally subversive in its writing. To people who haven't seen much mecha, this might be the case. However, one look at anything related to the genre sees that most of these concepts presented in Eva were not only present but explored in already mainstays in mecha. Let's first establish what we're talking about. Most tropes in the mecha and super robot subgenres were established in 1972's Mazinger Z. The series' impact on not only mecha, but also shonen, is monumental enough that it's practically what most Western fans think of when super robots are mentioned, even if they haven't in some cases heard of it. For reductive X-media is why of this place, Mazinger is somewhat of a golden age Superman of TV anime, so we'll be looking at the tropes presented by it. Some of the more relevant tropes to the discussion established in Mazinger are the Monster of the Week formula, the gung-ho pilot who remains close to the same character each and every week, normally hot-blooded, not affected by the terrors of their actions, the mechanical robots versus monster alien force, black and white morality with everyone in relation to hero being good guys, the power fantasy, saving the day no matter what to achieve the status quo, the natural talent of the pilot, the idealistic paint painted in most situations for the characters. There's probably some I'm missing, but you get the gist. Evangelion is a deconstruction since it looks at these tropes with a real-world lens and subverts the audience's expectations with said tropes. I'm here to say that those expectations were no longer reality to those who had been following the mech genre since that time, and that the genre of mecha had greatly changed since then. And one of the greatest changes since then is the existence of Mobile Suit Gundam. Gundam has a legitimate argument for one of the most important anime franchises. The first recap movie, when released, drew crowds so big there were legit police concerns. Newspapers even reporting it and calling it the day anime changed, with the third movie being one of the most successful anime movies of its era. It pioneered the real robot genre, which is still the predominant type of mecha show today. As stated by university professor Kinchara Morikawa, it's the first show to really capture the imagination of the otaku subculture. This isn't trying to discredit Eva's popularity, it's without question the biggest mecha/sci-fi anime since Gundam, the keyword being since. I bring this all up to say that Gundam is a big deal, like a really big deal. I don't think Yoshiyuki Tomino won an award for influencing Japanese culture, the same award that now Miyazaki and Miyamoto have won, Shigeru Miyamoto, because of Daidom 3. Daidom 3 is a good show, relatively well-known show, but it ain't Gundam now, is it? So whenever someone says 70s and 80s mecha pilots were gung-ho about piloting mecha, it's fair to bring up the most famous mecha protagonist, still to this day, Amuro Ray, was not. Hell, there was a whole Hello Kitty ad based on him not wanting to be inside the war fighting. Okay, it wasn't a thing. Amuro, at multiple times throughout the journey, struggles with piloting and stresses out because of it. He doesn't start out as a master at all. In fact, the first shark fight is a display that he's only winning because of how strong the Gundam is, not him. On multiple occasions, he runs away and tries to escape, even going as far to burying the Gundam in sand. The iconic "Not even my father could hit me like that" slap is a response to Bright being mad at Amuro for not wanting to pilot the thing. And he has a crazy asshole scientist dad too, who overworks himself and neglects him throughout the process. Amuro also, from what we can see, has some sort of new type PTSD, where he's unable to go back to space due to past experiences and being scarred due to the war. These things affected him. He's also being stayed at Earth and contained there because the fear the Federation has. The Federation is constantly an antagonistical force to our protagonist characters in Gundam, whether it be the OVAs or even the 79 series. I'm not the first one to bring up the comparisons about Gundam 79 and Evangelion. Many people that have watched both have brought up these ideas before. I would, however, like to present a second character in the Gundam franchise that came out about 10 years before Eva that also establishes that mecha was moving away from the tropes established in Mazinger Z. 1985 Mobile Suit Gundam Zeta's Camille Biden is one of the biggest emotional wrecks of a main protagonist, regardless of genre, in his era. A character whose introduction is him punching a guy in the face due to his own insecurities, running off to war to fulfill his own power fantasies, and having it all blow up in his face. Without getting into too much detail, since I don't want to spoil the ending of Zeta, I will say by the end of at least Double Zeta, Camille never pilots a mech again, even when the story and franchise has more than enough justification and chances to do so. In fact, one thing I personally would argue is that Camille's lack of presence in Char's counterattack, and including Unicorn, since, well, the events of Char's counterattack would leave him the only person to have a really close connection with Char, it would make more than enough sense for him to come back in those series, yet he doesn't. Anyone with a passing knowledge of Zeta understands why he isn't there, from at least a story perspective. He hates going into robot as much as Shinji ever did. This isn't an attack against the content or originality of Evangelion. It's just establishing that what Eva did with Shinji and other ideas people love to bring up were mainstays in mecha. They were already more a part of the norm than against it. So looking past the two actual biggest TV mecha pilots ever and TV mecha products in general, we still have many more examples from Gundam pre-Eva. Gundam Victory is one, but one I want to point out and spotlight is War in the Pocket. War in the Pocket doesn't even start a special chosen main pilot. It starts an actual just normal child who has some loose connection of the war because of his father. Its ending and overall message isn't the ideal in the slightest. If anything, it's almost an anti-mecha OVA. And if we want to go down the ladder and look at the second biggest mecha, at least of the 80s, you have Macross, which also features many pilots trying to avoid the war and conflict in general. This is when people would start to point the finger at the specification of super robots as a place where the deconstruction comes from, even though 90% of the time these grand sweeping statements are about all of mecha. With the specification of super robots, we can still see that mecha was being looked at with a real-world lens and asking questions and playing with mecha tropes far before Evangelion was ever labeled as a deconstruction. So there seems to be this prevalent thing where everyone shows the beginning of Evangelion as it's deconstructing super robots and mecha because Shinji falls flat on his face the first time he pilots Eva Unit 1. However, this dates back all the way in 1972 was, well, Mazinger. The first chapter, at least in the manga, Koji kills people. He has no idea what he's doing and it does a lot of damage. And if you want to look at the anime, because obviously things change, it's, more lighthearted, he almost kills his own brother. His brother needs to be saved by Sayaka. And they spend most of episode 2 him just exploring. He doesn't know what he's doing. So when I think that one of the forefathers of mecha is doing this, it's not really something you can deconstruct. 1977 Zampot 3 is another show by Gundam creator Yoshiaki Tomino. Is a super robot show that's not only gained enough popularity for the guy to get a much bigger budget on his next series, Daidom 3, it also gave Tomino the legacy of Kill Them All Tomino. Much like Eva, it starts out as a somewhat typical Monster of the Week show before turning into a depressing and at times introspective anime. It bucks a lot of the tropes of things turning back to normal, actual collateral damage and the effect on the wider world, kind of like Evangelion, and a constant failure to save the day and death. The hero himself gets called out by the villains for his reason for saving the day, and he can't answer them. The MC saves literally no one he loved. Forget the pilot, the Zampod doesn't want to be piloted by the end of the show.
怖いよ。父ちゃん、寒い。寒いよ、父ちゃん。嫌だ！怖いんだ。父ちゃん、母ちゃん、怖いよ。母ちゃん、助けてよ。何でも言うこと聞くからよ。
Ava quickly turns that formulaic start in on itself, however. It shows how traumatic this experience would be for 14-year-old kids, and completely spits in the face of the love conquers all theme found in previous mech shows. The love conquers all theme found in previous mech shows. The love conquers all theme found in previous mech shows.
It's quite the power fantasy, right? So this is when I should bring up Ideon. However, I've never seen Ideon, and that's okay. I can make the same case with or without it. It's 50-50 if it's a super robot show anyways, and besides, there's so much mecha that changed post Mazinger that really, it's not needed for this argument. 1988's Gunbuster, made by Hideki Anno himself, features basically a prototype of Shinji with Nadeko going through an arc of her own due to the tragedies of war. It also tries to implement a lot of real-world science to give the series a real-world lens. Science that's later been proven to be wrong, however, the intent was still there. It examines the possible psychological effects a fight like this could actually have, and the consequences of fighting a big intergalactical battle that Gunbuster takes place in. It's actually fairly comparable to Eva. Anno during Eva was studying psychology, and he implements a lot of story elements to give Evangelion a real-world feel. It's practically 95% the reason why we're here. Versus Gunbuster, which does that except with science and the impact it would have on the world and the characters. Since this is about the genre of mecha, not just anime in mecha, the legendary Getter Robo, which manga is probably the most infamous mecha manga ever, Anno describes Ken Ishikawa's Getter as a Bible for him, and something that's clearly inspired Gunbuster and other Gainax animes such as Gurren Lagann, much more than fucking Eva. Is not only the start of the multi-pilot mecha back in the 70s with the heart, mind, and soul dynamic between characters, something that Eva takes at least a little bit from. The manga sequel, Getter Robo Go in 1991, starts out as a war, reveals the star pilot of the last series, Ryoma, retired due to the mental strain of piloting, the fear of what the future holds with Getter Rays, the will of the Getter Rays, and the living robo Shin Getter. The Shin Getter is a being that's constantly trying to evolve until it assimilates with all living beings and is slowly destroying the minds of those who pilot it. We can see a lot of ideas that Getter Robo has helped establish back in 1973 in its original run throughout all of Getter Go being played with, twisted, and subverted, also looking at them with a real-world lens. One thing I see some fans like to bring up is the relationships between people and the robots, or their big military or people versus technology that Evangelion kind of plays with, which is an idea Getter Robo already established and played with far before Eva. Wait, this is the longest segment of the video because I really like it. Okay, yo, it gets better after 70 stuff. The 70 stuff is a little bit weird, but it gets better. I swear, just get to the 90s, get together, go. If we open our mind up to not just aspects Evangelion deconstructed, we can see how much the genre has changed throughout the years. Overbattles Dunbine, Votmos, Pat Labor, Bubblegum Crisis, Laser, Magic Knight Ray Earth. All these mecha are vastly different. None of them are the same, and they present new ideas and evolve the genre as the years went by. The main issue with calling Evangelion a deconstruction of mecha tropes, what exactly are we deconstructing? Mazinger Z? Shows like Guy King? Shows that literally came out at the genesis of TV anime? At the genesis of colored TV anime? Is this what we're going aggro on? Congratulations, Ava, you really showed that Steel Jag who's boss. Man, Go Nagai must be so pissed. He must really hate you, Anno. He's only gonna let you work on one of his most profitable IPs. Twice. Wait, no one in Japan thinks Evangelion is a deconstruction, or any creators or anybody involved with mecha? Wait, is Cutie Honey like that Kai Honey VTuber thing? It's a magical girl show? Wait, full nip? Mechas have studied the ramifications of escapism. They've been isekais, they've been in post-apocalyptic worlds, psychological studies, studies of PTSD, cosmic horror, comedies, cyberpunk, war stories, tragedies. They've had us feel for the everyman while throwing around galaxies. It's one of the most defining genres of anime, even though it's not the greatest genre name, and it's provided countless people with creative arts that have lasted the test of time and been primary inspirations for the best anime has to offer. And one of those shows you may ask that's taken a primary inspiration from mecha? Not Evangelion. Eva does take a lot of inspiration from mecha, but the focus of it being a deconstruction of mecha for freaking decades in the West becomes comical when you realize it's not even the main genre it's taking from. Evangelion doesn't take the most from Getter, or Zamba, or Mazinger, or Ideon, or Gundam, or Space Battleship Yamato, or Devilman Crybaby. Hell, it's not even the medium of animation it's taking primary inspiration from. It's tokusatsu, and more specifically, Ultraman. For a short rundown on how Ultraman is Evangelion, the concept of a military operative group with a headquarters fighting aliens with a giant godlike robot with time limits and red ball cores for a Monster Week show, that's Ultraman. Many of the weird, interesting directing and art house stylings of Eva, not all, but a good portion of that is Ultraman. The symbolism, which considering how important the cross is in Ultraman, and Anno has stated means nothing, so to go by his word, that's probably Ultraman. That one wheeled angel, that's very much an Ultraman. The random phone call in Eva 2.0, most definitely an Ultraman. The carving on the floor, that's an Ultraman. The being of light, that's an Ultraman. The alien force trying to find alternative ways to deal with the hero by becoming a human, that's Ultra 7. Which is Ultraman. The finale of the rebuild taking place in a tokusatsu set, okay, maybe some Kamen Rider, but that's also Ultraman. Eva Unit 1's design, okay. Tiny bit of Shingetter, come on, just a tiny, just a little, it's Ultraman, okay, the ending of the Rebuild 2.0, legit just Ultraman. The opening credit of Studio Kara having the Ultraman transforming sound be its effect for the studio logo, you know, the studio that made Evangelion 4.0 and 3.0 and 2.0 and 1.0 and that Anno himself has opened, might be a little bit of Ultraman. Just a smidge, just a chance, just a little bit of Ultraman in there. There are actually more Ultraman and Evangelion parallels and connections I can make. Regardless of Anno saying that Ultraman is the whole reason why he's here, and it's literally his favorite thing ever, and that, well, this is already kind of a meme in the community of people who know it. And the connections are much deeper and much more prominent than the ones I've just mentioned. You can even go to full characters like Rei being inspired by Ultraman. And as the rebuilds go on, it even becomes more and more prominent. If you want more information about this, since many YouTube videos that do deep analysis on Evangelion don't mention this fact at all. In fact, they just say that Anno liked Ultraman and he likes tokusatsu, then go on to talk about Evangelion and never mentioning probably the most important series and genre to Evangelion. There are two videos by the user Blunova, or Blunova, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, who covered this topic in much greater detail and is a much better editor and video creator in general than me. I linked both of his videos in the description. I did watch Ultraman and Ultra 7, but I got a little bit burned out in the middle of Ultra 7 and kind of used his videos as a scapegoat. So shoutouts to Blunova or Blunova. Great videos, and he also does a lot of great other content where he covers a lot of old Japanese media. So if you're into that and you think Kamiyu PFPs are based, go check him out. In conclusion, mecha is a terrible genre name that is now cursed for everyone to think it's generic and bad because early 2000 anime fans wanted to sound smart when talking about Eva. And it's also one of my favorite mechas of all time, probably number one, probably my top 5 favorite animes of all time, but that doesn't mean it was a deconstruction of anything. It's more like a step forward, or the next step, for mecha after shows like Zeta than it is a deconstruction of 70s stuff. Did it evolve the mecha genre? Sure, it did. It absolutely evolved the mecha genre, just like shows like Bubblegum Crisis and all the shows I listed before. Did it expand on a lot of ideas? Was a more psychological study of its characters? 1000% yes. Don't let anybody or any haters say that it didn't do anything great. Did it subvert mecha? Not really, unless you don't know much about mecha. So, North America, it's just a really, really good show. And you can get by just calling Evangelion a really good show. That's what it is. It's fantastic. Now, please, let's all stop being wrong about Evangelion. Watch some Gal Gaigar. That show has like a 4-minute fucking hammer tag. Holy shit. Or some Getter Robo yo, I'm telling you, it gets really good after the 70s stuff. Just get to the 90s. The 70s stuff is okay too. You know, my boys, shout outs to that 2-hour video that got me together. Just like, avoid cross cringe. That show sucks. Like it's bad. Like, I think that cross cringe is the real deconstruction of mecha because it's so bad. I wanted to destroy every mecha that came before it. So there you go. Stop being wrong about Evangelion and start being right about whatever that series was. Tusk, the Ainge, and face into.